So I think it was end of 2022, toward the end of that year, or about middle of that year, I had joined early on that year, I had joined the DI committee
Okay.
for Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
And we would have conversations about how people were facing um, just challenges with diversity, equity. That's also
Mm-hmm.
the time because the whole George Floyd thing happened in 2020. And that sort of just created this whole deal where everybody wanted to identify with some type of diversity efforts. Um, and what I was noticing was companies were dealing with the pressure of, you know, knowing that they had to take a stand for something and they had to show that they were doing something to participate in what was happening and what was trending. Um, I don't know that companies were being intentional, you know, but as I joined the DI committee around the middle of 2022, a big conversation was how do we support our HR leaders? How do we support organizations and sort of help them uh, put out the right programs that's going to be impactful? Basically, how do we support them? Because we were now at a point where we knew we're at a loss for which way to go, what the strategy needs to be. Now, I feel like up until that conversation happened, I didn't really have, or up until that conversation began in our committee, I didn't really have um, anything that like really triggered going back to some of my own personal experiences. But once those conversations started to happen, it was just, I think for me, it was just this rush of, oh my gosh, you've been through this, you've dealt with this. And, now you're at a different point in your life. You're now building relationships in a city where you didn't even think you were going to be in for long because you didn't feel like you were a part. You didn't feel like it was welcoming. There were all this negative feeling that I had in the first, maybe couple years of moving here to Springfield. And so as these conversations began, I started to think back even to like my Coxhill days and some of the encounters that I had in my management role, working with Americans for the first time, and more specifically, white Americans for the first time, and never really having any type of like exposure or awareness to them, and how this was very much the reason that I was getting in trouble with them. There were conversations and things. I had a one time I had a we had a huddle. I was meeting with my team, and one of my co-managers just came in to be a part of it. And at the end of the meeting, she called me to the side and she said, you used the word um, when you were in the meeting. Don't ever use that word again.
Goodness.
Don't ever use that word again. And it was, to me, it was a word that was like just normal. So it wasn't like, it didn't have any intensity to it, but she said that it had some intensity,
almost profanity
to it. Yeah. And it was just that, like, just walking away from that conversation with her and just, all around feeling like, I don't know what that was about, but that was not comfortable.
Right.
And then in addition to that, having literally a full page of complaints against me to human resources because of things that happen in conversation that from my perspective, I was just being me.
Right.
But from the receiver's perspective, there was just they were like offended, and they thought that my treatment of them was negative. So I started to think back to all of those things, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much happening in conversation that we miss, that in the long run, those are the things, those little conversations here and there, those encounters we're having with people are essentially what ends up forming our perspective of the people that we work with, and what ends up forming ultimately what our relationship then becomes, or how we're able to work together. Because in many instances there, I struggled to work with certain people because of those different approaches and those different perspectives. And so when we started talking about this in the DEI committee, it was just like, absolutely, like this is something that we need to teach people how to interact, how to communicate with people who are not like us, because I'm not going to walk into a conversation knowing exactly how you communicate, especially if I haven't encountered you before, right? And so if you immediately take that position of offense, then that shuts the door on my opportunity to begin to learn about you, because there's automatically that wall that's in between. And that's what we continue to see. So the other part of that was, I honestly didn't even want to, I was already doing a lot. I didn't want to get into cultural competency or anything of that sort. But I also knew if I didn't offer myself to it, I didn't think that there was anybody else who could really have that perspective in the way that I did, that would be able to put a program together. And that's honestly how cultural competency came about, or the ultimate team party, as we call it. That's how it came about. And of course, it's just taking different shapes, and it's just really encouraging to see how much it's impacting people and their ability to connect with people that are not others, that are not like them. You know?
Yeah. And I think it's important to, in that process, to recognize that your own struggle brought about inspiration and motivation to create a program that allows others to learn from your experiences and those of others, to take that back into their organization and say, you know, this is valuable feedback and valuable insight into how we can operate better, how we can better communicate and identify with one another, even if, you know, that everyone is from a different country or a different culture. Finding that core value of being able to receive and hear that feedback, and do something about it, and changing the culture of the organization as a whole, so that everyone is listening, so that everyone is able to communicate and not just immediately meet one another with that filter of offense, as you put it, and remove that barrier for the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do think that the experiences piece is such a huge part of it. You know, you just don't know what experiences people have based on, you know, who they are, their identity, their culture, and all of that. You know, one day I walked into Walmart. I think it was the one on Grand, on like East Grand and Campbell or something. There's that neighborhood Walmart there. And I walked in and I ran into a Nigerian friend of mine. Both her mom and dad were at the store. And of course, they were also from my tribe, my dad's tribe. And in my dad's tribe, when you see an older person, the women kneel to greet them, and the men will prostrate flat on the floor to greet them. And so, just natural instinct, you know, I walk in, and on seeing them, I just went on my knees to greet them. And as I was getting up, there was like literally a line of people behind me who you could tell were confused as to why is she kneeling?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they even thought, is she like a, is she getting abused, or
Oh,
like, what is the relationship
right.
there?
Mm-hmm.
Right. But you also see the Indians who will, greet older people by touching their feet.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And the greetings vary from culture to culture.
Absolutely.
Um, and so one of my big challenges has been taking sort of what my greeting style is as a Yoruba Nigerian woman and coming into the American workforce. And now I have to go and mentally shift from kneeling to shaking an older person's hands
Right.
in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And these are things that go missed in conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not shaking a person's hand properly, they think you're not confident, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
They say, I shook somebody's hands once who said, when you have a firm handshake, it shows that you're confident.
Correct.
But how am I supposed to be confident when I'm still up in my head trying to transition
Mm-hmm.
from kneeling
Right.
to now shaking your
Right.
hands,
Mm-hmm.
when a handshake to me tells me I'm disrespecting you at the highest level?
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, I will not be communicating confidence in my handshake.
Right. Right.
And so that's why we recently started the Experiences and Insights panel, because that is such a huge avenue for people to begin to intentionally just hear about other people, how, what their experiences have been, how their culture informs the way that they interact with people, where things have maybe been misunderstood
Mm-hmm.
in their conversations with people or interactions with people. Um, the Experiences and Insights panel really just takes it home,
Mm-hmm.
is how I see it. And that's why when we created that earlier this year, it just got me really excited. And like, even in our last class, we had somebody, a Gen Z who was on the panel, shared that when you're texting a Gen Z, you don't include a period if it's just the sentence.
Mm-hmm.
If you're writing a paragraph, it's okay to use a period, but if you use a period for just a short sentence, they consider that you're upset,
Mm-hmm.
or that you're just being rude.
Mm-hmm.
And so she said, instead of that, why not just, if you're going to use a period because you want to be grammatically correct,
Mm-hmm.
put a smiley
Mm-hmm.
after
An
the
emoji.
period.
Yes, an emoji.
And I heard that and I was like, there is no way I would have known, because when I'm texting, when I'm emailing, well, texting more is what she was focused on. I want to be grammatically correct.
Yes.
I typically don't like to use abbreviations. I don't,
Right. Mm-hmm.
and sometimes I even get onto people when they use abbreviations.
Right.
But now it's like, you see that the Gen Zers are communicating a whole different way. And there
Mm-hmm.
needs to be that willingness and openness to enter into their world, understand what what they know,
Mm-hmm.
and how they communicate, and then find that bridge, find a
Mm-hmm.
way where, how do we connect both approaches,
Yeah.
and both cultures? How do we connect it?
Yeah.
And that's really where we struggle. And I think that that's a big part of the Experiences and Impact. We also had a boomer on that panel. I think we had a Mexican, and then we had um, it was somebody else. Then we had African perspective as well, which I was able to weigh in on also. So just, the panel is such an exciting addition. And I just heard all good stuff about it.
Yeah. And I think, from my perspective as a communicator, of the utmost importance in everyday life, whether I'm coaching a client or making connections out in the community with other professionals and business owners, it's important that I recognize their communication style, as well as making sure that I am utilizing my own skill set.
Right.
And it looks different for everyone. Like you said, we all have different backgrounds, we all have different perspectives. But for me, as a communicator, through and through, it's connecting the dots.
Yeah.
It's making sure that we are looking at a person individually,
Yeah.
knowing that, they are going to have a different lens. They are going to have a different style. And so having the Experience and Insights panel will allow the attendees and the participants to really gain feedback from different intersectionalities throughout our community, but also to shift the way that we think about things.
Right.
We as humans tend to get into a comfort zone and say, well, this is the way things are.
Right.
And we struggle with getting outside of that bubble because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Maybe we are attempting to make a change or a shift, and we don't quite know how to do that. And so when we have participants that are willing to say, this is my experience and this is what happened to me, and here's what would have made it even better.
Yep.
This is what would really make that connection solid, and how you can take that and apply it to everyday situations or within the community or within the workforce, and really solidify that, our lived experiences are vast, far and wide across the board, but they're relevant and they do mean something. And we are, sitting down at the table with everyone and saying, hey, come listen and take some valuable information from this opportunity and apply it to yourself, apply it to your daily interactions, so that you do grow and so that you do get outside your bubble and you're not so intimidated by, talking to someone of a different culture or a different ethnicity, and you're empowered. You're a little bit more confident in knowing that no one will ever have all the answers. No one will ever have all of the tips and tricks, but you can start by listening, by hearing the experiences of others, and taking that with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that and in order for us as people, as individuals, in order for us to be able to come to that point of, just willingness and openness, we have to first address, how do we see people? How do we value people as individuals? How do we honor and respect people, even if their culture or their identity and their practices and their traditions and all of those things, even if they don't make sense?
Yeah.
How do we honor that anyway? Because we value them as a person.
Yes.
Right? And
Absolutely.
That's the big part of it. It's you have to reach that point where you say to yourself, I don't have to align with this person in their perspectives, their thoughts, or their beliefs, their practices. I don't have to align with them in order to honor and respect who they are and what they bring.
Right.
And that's the real piece of, just that's the driving force right there.
Right.
Is I want to connect with you because I see you, because I honor and respect you.
Yes.
Because I know I need you as well.
Right.
Because we need community, we need people.
Yes.
And you don't need to have those alignments in order to be able to build genuine connections with people.
Yeah.
So,
and we don't need everyone to think exactly the same way or behave exactly the same way in order to identify as a community.
Right.
Everyone having a different perspective is actually healthy, and it promotes conversation. It promotes that deeper dive conversation of what makes them tick, or what brought them to that conclusion, or what will help to form that bridge, and maybe move for change, or maybe impact a certain resolution,
Yeah.
or finding the common ground first is that we're human, and that
absolutely.
we all deserve the same level of respect and recognition. And it really starts with listening and communicating.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'm excited
Me
about
too.
our next class, and I'm just, I'm looking forward to it. And each time we do this is probably class number, I don't know, I've lost track at this point, but I'm excited.
And I think for me, as someone that just recently joined the team, I love what you're doing. I love your mission. Obviously, I think I've said that 100 times now, but it is a core value of mine to listen and to connect, through all things life. And so this brings it to a whole new level. You're doing the work, you're doing the hard things. Like Brene Brown says, you can do hard things. We can do hard things. But it also allows me to step into the role of listening, even still, even though I'm interacting, even though I'm participating on a different level, I can still listen. I can still take that information and say, okay, that situation with the Gen Z and their communication style doesn't resonate with me at all. But I can take that knowledge and say, okay, I love emojis. I will send you 100 emojis all day long if I need to, if that is what will help break that barrier. But also, I'm probably going to stick to my commitment to being grammatically correct.
Same here.
And maybe put in some smiley faces occasionally, maybe some hearts. But it also is impacting me in a way that, will be useful even in my personal life. And so I really am excited and grateful for the opportunity, and
excited
just
too.
Getting this opportunity has just really been great.
Nice. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I'm excited to have you on the team, and I'm just excited about everything that we're going to do this year and beyond. The goal is to keep it going and to continue to build connections in our community. So excited.
Me too.